Friends, I got the craziest true crime story for you coming out of England. But before I tell you, have a look at this picture. Tell me, how many of these serial killers can you name? You see, the suspect in this story had those posters in her living room. Who has all these posters in their living room? So let's see how crazy you are. How many of these can you name? Former school girlfriends of weirdo killer Shaye Groves have reflected on her fetish for true crime, masochism, and BDSM because she was sentenced to life for murder. I found a newspaper article regarding this story. Let me read it out to you. And it's crazy. She was into true crime. You think she probably saw me at some point? Groves, who was 27, was sentenced at Winchester Crown Court for slitting the throat of Mr. Fitzgerald before stabbing him 17 times in the chest in July last year. 17 times. For what? Also, if you take a look at this girl, I mean, what on earth are you dressed like? If I saw her in the club, I would say to her, bitch, it's not Halloween. A close friend of Groves from childhood spoke anonymously about the warning signs of Groves. The friend said that when they hung out, Shay was quite strange, but she was okay. However, she had an obsession with Chucky dolls. Who obsesses over Chucky? When she was younger, she was different to what she is now. She was more girly, but she was never like a girly girl and she always stood out from the crowd. We'd all be in bright colors and she'd be the one in the dark clothes, even from that age. She didn't wear what she wore now, but she wasn't a goth, but she was always unique. She always seemed a bit weird. I'm weird too, doesn't mean I go stab someone, does it? Now, according to the ex-friend, in recent years, Groves didn't socialize much and spent more time with Miss White and Vicky Batop, who reported her to the police after video calling them and showing them Mr. Fitzgerald's body. Miss White and Vicky were just friends of the suspect. And it was earlier, in February 2023, where the jurors convicted serial killer obsessed Groves as the charge of murder after a 5-week trial where she had to portray herself as a victim. The revelations included in the trial ranged from the shocking details of the couple's sex life to the chillingly blasé way Groves reacted to being arrested. Havant is the city in England in which this took place. Now, I grew up in England. I went to high school with many girls like this. Some were weird, some were cool. But the one thing I noticed about women like this, they were the thick as pig shit. The tragic and twisted story of Groves' life began to emerge. In pictures as recent as 2019, Groves can be smiling as she bakes cakes with her young daughter. However, the doting mother of yesteryear cuts a very different image now. Bloated with tattoos and piercings, her face seemingly set to permanent leering smirk in her police photos. Another woman who met Groves once at a Pop World nightclub through her friendship with Miss White and also wished to remain anonymous said, Shay used to bully Lauren and make her do things. I've been out clubbing with Shay, she was just a weirdo. Regarding her tattoo, she added, it must have been 2 years ago that she had the throat one done, but she didn't have the big line down her face. And she used to have a lip piercing, but not all those other ones. She did start to dress a bit gothy about 2 years ago as she was turning goth. Prior to gruesome murder, Groves developed an obsession for true crime. In the house she shared with her young daughter, the walls were filled with photos of famous murderers. Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy. Don't forget, tell me how many names you could get. Whilst her daughter played with dolls, Groves would play with the decorative Celtic daggers that she kept on her coffin-shaped bookshelf. This girl was just doolally, wasn't she? At nights, Groves would binge watch true crime documentaries and reread her collected books about gangsters, including the notorious prisoner Charles Bronson. She even had serial killer mugs. This unhealthy obsession, allied with a sexual fetish for heavy BDSM involving domination and masochism, reached a crescendo when she was introduced to 25-year-old Frankie Fitzgerald at a pub in January 2022. Whose performance in the bedroom made Groves violently possessive. Now, I do consider myself quite the rutting rhino while in bed, but I don't think I've ever made anyone violently possessive. What does that mean? Let me know. Over the course of their 6-month relationship, the two pushed their sexual appetites to the absolute limit, using 4 decorative knives with depictions of film villains such as Chucky, Jigsaw, and Pennywise for knife play. Now, with all due respect, when I see Jigsaw or Pennywise, it don't make me horny. You do. So now you're going to ask yourself, alright, but what actually happened? Why did she do this? Well, last year, she saw Instagram messages between Frankie and some 13-year-old girl. This resulted on Groves becoming very jealous. However, all these messages were fake and they weren't real. But upon seeing these messages, as Frankie was sleeping that night, she got a dagger. She wanted to get twisted revenge and slit his throat with a Celtic ritual dagger before madly stabbing at his chest 17 times. When he was quiet dead, the crazed, true crime obsessive began to formulate an insidious plan to get away with her crime, using the tricks of the trade that she learnt from all these true crime shows. Just for the record, I ain't ever told you guys how to get away with murder. By the way, I don't know if you guys ever watched that show, How to Get Away with Murder. Class. Knowing she would be suspected in Frankie's murder, Grove set about changing the optics and tried to portray herself to her friend, Vicky, as a victim of Mr. Fitzgerald's sexual violence. In the horrid videos of the two having sex, Groves had clumsily edited the footage to make it appear as sexual assault. But the prosecution did not see this and managed to see through all the fakery. She also rang a friend giggling after killing her lover, showing his body and saying, "I've done him." But after all her lies and ruses, it ended the way it always does for the people in the true crime documentaries she binged. Sentencing her to life with a minimum term of 23 years, Mr. Justice Kerr told Groves she was not a cold-blooded murderer and killing was a crime of passion, telling her, "You love the man you killed and you killed the man you love." This will be scant consolation for the family of Groves as she begins one of the life sentences she read about in her gangster books. She's just a silly cow. You know the truth about this? Forget all the jokes. She actually had no purpose. When you're this influenced by all those serial killers, you know when something takes over, right? You know merchandise, right? You know when you buy the books, you buy the mugs, you buy the t-shirts, you buy the posters. That's when you know whatever that is has become a part of your life. Harry Potter is a prime example. I don't mean that negatively. I don't mean that in a murder way. Like me with the Liverpool Football Club, my soccer team, right? I have the jerseys, I have the mugs. It becomes part of your life. It's a healthy support. It's not even obsession. It's a healthy hobby, right? But when you look at this specific subject and you add the knives and you add all the posters, right? Like having a poster of, I don't know, Michael Jackson on your wall, that's fine. But having a poster of Jeffrey Dahmer, it's a bit weird, isn't it? And she only did that because she had no other purpose. She had no personality. She had no place in this world. So when she was able to relate or when she latched on to something that made her feel better about herself, she consumed it. In other words, true crime. I do this for a living. And even I don't watch that much true crime because there's only so much the brain can take. So the best way I can conclude that she was just a silly cow.
Serial killer-obsessed woman who stabbed her on-off boyfriend to death has been jailed for life with at least 23 years in prison. Shaye Groves sentenced at Winchester Crown Court for the murder of 25-year-old Frankie Fitzgerald. She stabbed 17 times last July in Hampshire. Let's get more with our reporter Ray Addison, who's been following events at Winchester Crown Court. Ray, it's pretty heavy-duty stuff.
Yeah, it's a very disturbing case, this one, Mark. Shaye Groves was 26 at the time of this offence. Now, she was a goth, obsessed with serial killers, somebody who decorated her bedroom with framed portraits of murderers, people like Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, and Moors murderer Myra Hindley as well. Now, she'd been dating Frankie Fitzgerald, who was 25, on and off for around 6 months, and prosecutors during the trial said that she was completely obsessed with him. They had a mutual interest in role play involving domination and submission. Now, during the trial, the prosecution argued that Groves had used her interest in murder and true crime to try to prepare an alibi. She had a CCTV camera set up in her bedroom, and she would take clips from that footage and send it to a friend, Vicky Baitup, to imply that there had been sexual violence involved in her relationship. Now, in the early hours of the 17th of July 2022, as Frankie Fitzgerald was asleep in her bed, she used a dagger to slit his throat, and then she stabbed him 17 times in the chest as well. She didn't then call 999. Instead, she video phoned her friend, Ms. Baitup, and told her that she'd been looking through Mr. Fitzgerald's phone phone, had seen a message to a girl on Facebook and had, quote, lost it and then stabbed him. She told Miss Bateup that she was going to clean up and bury him in the back garden. Now, at that point, Miss Bateup alerted the police. They arrived 5 hours later, and she told them that he had tried to attack her. Now, the court, obviously, the jury did not find that a convincing argument. In his summation, the judge said that this was clearly a crime of passion. She realised that her relationship with Frankie Fitzgerald was ending, and she had lost her temper and acted on impulse. She will now serve a minimum of 23 years in jail. She'll be 50 when she's eligible for parole.